Welcome back to Outlaw Operations. Tonight, we're diving into a chilling case filled with deception, greed, and betrayal. A story that seemed to be about love and ambition but ended in tragedy. Before we get into it, take a second to drop a comment. Where are you listening from? And if you enjoy true crime storytelling, hit that like button and subscribe. Now, let's settle in and get started. Austin Malcolm Haru, known to those around him as the Golden Boy, was born on a warm December day in 1996, right along the breezy coastlines of Palm Beach, Florida. From the outside, his life looked like something straight out of a perfect postcard: sun, success, and stability. The Haru family was well known in medical circles, his father, a dentist with multiple private practices, and his mother, a respected pharmaceutical expert. Their home, a pristine estate with sweeping ocean views, was a reflection of everything people thought the American dream should look like. When Austin was barely 2 years old, his younger sister Haley came into the world. The bond between them formed fast, sealed in shared toys, backyard adventures, and late-night whispers under moonlit bedroom ceilings. Their parents, ever devoted to excellence, made sure both kids had access to top-tier education, music lessons, sports training, and every chance to thrive. And thrive, Austin did. By middle school, he was already a standout, the kind of kid teachers adored and classmates secretly envied. He was athletic, excelling in wrestling and football, but also artistic, playing the guitar and performing with a local theater group. His imagination had no ceiling. In his own words, he saw himself as a dreamer, someone with the potential to do something big. Yet, for all his light, there was always a quiet shadow trailing close behind, a deep shyness that made it hard for him to really connect with others. He could perform on stage, but conversations in the school hallway felt like battles. At 13, everything shifted. His parents' marriage, once the unshakable foundation of his world, crumbled. His father moved out first, and soon remarried. His mother followed suit not long after. Austin stayed with her, adjusting to a new man in the house, new dynamics, and a new sense of loneliness that began to cling to him. Despite the emotional weight, he refused to let go of his ambitions. He pushed forward, harder, faster. Straight A's. Captain of his team. Still dreaming of becoming a doctor, just like his parents. Physically, Austin transformed during those teenage years. He shot up to 6 feet 2 inches, his body turning into something out of a fitness magazine, broad-shouldered, sculpted, powerful. With his soft-spoken voice and clean-cut charm, people often said he looked like an angel. But inside, he was a storm brewing. Social anxiety and isolation chipped away at him. He wrote about it in his personal diary, pages filled with confessions of loneliness, of being labeled a nerd, of feeling invisible. College, he believed, would be his reset button. A fresh start. And when he was accepted into the prestigious 4-year medical program at the University of Florida, it felt like everything was finally falling into place. His parents were proud. His sister was excited for him. And Austin was hopeful. He packed up his dreams, waved goodbye, and stepped into campus life, documenting everything on a personal blog he started. But college wasn't the fresh start he imagined. Instead of finding his people, Austin found the gym. Bodybuilding became his obsession. His gains were impressive, almost unnatural. Whispers started. He wasn't shy about it, either. In spring 2016, he launched a YouTube vlog. It started harmlessly enough: guitar covers, fitness tips, even deep, thoughtful takes on life. But slowly, things began to change. The tone darkened. Austin began posting about steroids, warning others of their mental effects. He talked about feeling like someone else was living in his skin, about snapping in and out of normal and crazy states. His voice would shift mid-video. Sometimes he cried. Sometimes he laughed at things no one else could understand. People in the comments asked if he was okay. Some thought he was high. Others guessed he had a personality disorder. Austin always denied using anything illegal, saying he'd never touch banned substances. But something was unraveling, and fast. When summer came and he returned home, his family barely recognized him. His muscles had grown even more, but it wasn't just the physique. It was the look in his eyes, the way he talked, like he was stuck between two worlds. He rambled nonsense. He claimed he didn't need to sleep. He paced through the night, telling his mother and sister that he was guarding them, protecting them from something unnamed. At first, they thought it was just college stress, or maybe too much caffeine. But as the hours dragged on and the sun refused to rise in Austin's eyes, they realized this wasn't just a phase. This wasn't just a breakdown. Something was wrong, deeply, irreversibly wrong. The golden boy was slipping. And no one knew it yet, but this was only the beginning of the nightmare. It started with strange footsteps in the night. Austin paced the hallways of his home like a restless guardian, whispering into the darkness, checking in on his mother and sister every hour with a loud, deliberate voice, "Everything's fine. You can sleep now. I'm watching over you." His words, though meant to reassure, were unsettling. There was a tension in his voice, a flicker in his eyes that suggested he wasn't just standing watch for peace of mind, he believed he was protecting them from something unseen, something threatening. His mother, exhausted and deeply concerned, sat him down the next morning. She asked him what was going on, really going on. It wasn't just worry anymore, it was fear. That's when Austin admitted the truth. He told her about the drugs, the stimulants, the synthetic ones that warped his perception of reality, the ones that made him feel unstoppable, enraged, invincible. He described hallucinations, blackouts, surges of energy that turned into dark spirals. One of the drugs, he confessed, could be fatal if used even a little too much. But then came the promise. He told his mother he had stopped, that the worst was behind him. That he wasn't in danger anymore. She wanted to believe him. As a pharmacist, she trusted her own expertise. Instead of calling professionals, she took matters into her own hands. She gave him sedatives, sleeping pills, anything that might soothe the chaos swirling inside his mind. After nights of pacing, Austin would finally sleep, but only for a few hours. Then the patrol resumed. Back and forth in the house, checking on his family every hour, always assuring them, "It's quiet. Everything's under control." But everything wasn't. Over the next few weeks, Austin's grip on reality began to slip. His behavior shifted from strange to deeply troubling. Yet, his mother held on to hope, convinced she could fix this, that it was just a phase or a chemical imbalance she could manage. She never called a psychiatrist. She didn't even tell his father. Then, on the morning of August 13th, Austin paid a visit to someone he hadn't spoken to in over a year, an old classmate who lived nearby. She opened the door, surprised and a little confused. He hadn't called, hadn't messaged, hadn't hinted at reconnecting. And when she asked why he came, his answer made her skin crawl. "I forgot the year I was born," he said flatly. "Do you know what year it is?" "It's 1996, she replied, stunned. Without another word, Austin turned around and walked away. No goodbye. No explanation. Rattled, the girl called Austin's mother immediately. She asked if Austin might be using again. Something felt deeply wrong. That call became the tipping point. His mother finally reached out to her ex-husband, Austin's father, who was working out of state. The next day, Austin's father was on a flight to Florida. When he arrived, he saw it too. Something was unraveling. He asked Austin to voluntarily check himself into a clinic, but Austin refused. He insisted he was fine. No one could convince him otherwise. That night, his parents made a decision. If Austin wouldn't go willingly, they would have to commit him, force an evaluation, get him help before something terrible happened. But they were too late. The next day was hot and sunny. Some of Austin's friends invited him to the beach. His mother, still deeply worried, asked his sister Haley to go with him, to watch him. Austin was unusually excited for the outing, but when he got dressed, something was off. He didn't wear swim trunks or sandals. Instead, he stepped out in a thick hoodie, long pants, boots, and ski goggles. His friends stared, unsure whether to laugh or ask questions. Eventually, the awkwardness turned into teasing. That's when Austin snapped. "If you think I'm crazy," he shouted, "I'll show you crazy." He threatened them, seriously. And for the first time, they didn't laugh. They stepped back. Just in case. Haley knew he was about to break. She pulled him aside, tried to reason with him. And that's when he said something that chilled her. "I think I'm not fully human," he whispered. "I think I'm part wild animal, immortal. And I have powers." She wanted to run. But she stayed calm. She nodded, listened, trying not to provoke him. At the beach, he calmed down. For a while, things seemed normal. He joked. He played volleyball. He laughed like everything was okay. But it wasn't. Later that evening, they headed to a small restaurant to meet their father and his wife. On the way there, Austin suddenly turned toward a busy highway and began walking toward it, directly into traffic. "I want to test something," he said. "I want to see if I really am immortal." Haley panicked. She ran after him and pulled him back just in time. She begged him to come to dinner. "They're waiting for us," she said. "Let's not be late." He nodded quietly and followed her. At the restaurant, Austin couldn't sit still. He kept leaving the table, going outside to look around. He seemed paranoid, like he thought someone was watching him. When he finally sat down, he told his father and stepmother about his immortality. About the powers. About how he wasn't meant to live like everyone else. His father responded calmly, suggesting once again that Austin see someone, anyone, who could help. But Austin exploded. "I'm not insane," he screamed, slamming his hand down and shoving his father hard before storming out of the restaurant. He walked for miles. Somewhere along the way, he ended up in a quiet neighborhood he didn't recognize. That's when he saw it, a garage bathed in warm light, inviting, familiar. He walked toward it like a moth to a flame. Inside, 59-year-old John Stevens and his wife Michelle Mitchin Stevens were settling in for their usual evening. They had been married for over 25 years. 3 grown children, all living on their own. Retirement life was peaceful. Their garage was set up like a cozy living room, perfect for grilling, watching movies, and enjoying Florida nights. John had just taken the dog for a walk while Michelle prepared for their evening together. When she saw Austin on the lawn, she didn't panic. He looked lost, not threatening. She even asked if he needed help. But whatever answer he gave her, it wasn't words. It was violence. Across the street, their neighbor Jeffrey Fisher heard the first scream around 9 p.m. Michelle's voice pierced the quiet night. Jeffrey ran outside. He didn't hesitate. He rushed to the Stevens home and saw a horrifying scene unfolding near the garage. Austin was there, wild, frenzied, out of control. Jeffrey tried to intervene, tried to pull Austin away from Michelle, but he was impossibly strong. Austin knocked him to the ground, and when Jeffrey tried to get up, Austin stabbed him. The nightmare had only just begun. Jeffrey didn't think. He just ran. The blade had already struck him several times, in the back, in the shoulder. The pain was sharp, but what scared him more was the realization that he was completely overpowered. Whoever this guy was, he wasn't just attacking, he was destroying. And he wasn't going to stop. So, bleeding and terrified, Jeffrey bolted straight into the Stevens house. He wasn't thinking about hiding. He wasn't even thinking about survival. He just needed to draw Austin away, divert his attention, so maybe, just maybe, Michelle could get away. Slipping out the back door, Jeffrey sprinted across the yard, his adrenaline numbing the pain. He barely made it into his own house before collapsing inside, breathing heavily, everything spinning. That's when it hit him, Austin wasn't following. No footsteps. No shouting. Nothing. Just silence. And then, the silence broke. From across the yard, through the thin evening air, came a sound that made Jeffrey's skin crawl, low, inhuman growls. Like a beast. Followed by something far worse, screams. Real ones. Desperate. Michelle's voice. He grabbed his phone with a shaking hand and called 911, choking out words about a man with a knife, about blood, about screams. He told them Michelle had been attacked, that he had been stabbed. Then his voice went quiet. He just listened. 10 minutes. That's how long it took for the first squad car to arrive. But by then, it was already too late. 2 officers approached the garage first, weapons drawn. They stopped cold the second they looked inside. Michelle Stevens was already gone. Her body was motionless in a thick pool of blood. The later autopsy would show her skull had been fractured by multiple blunt force blows, and a knife had pierced her chest with surgical intent. A little deeper inside the garage, under the dim glow of a hanging bulb, another horror played out. John Stevens, Michelle's husband, was lying on the floor, barely moving. His arm trembled, reaching upward in a weak, almost childlike plea for help. But someone was on top of him. Austin. The same man who had stabbed Jeffrey. He wasn't just choking John. He was biting him. Chunks of John's face had been torn off. His left cheek was missing. His ear, gone. Blood was everywhere. His lips were shredded, barely recognizable. The officers shouted. Demanded that Austin stop. That he let go. That he surrender. But Austin didn't flinch. Didn't even acknowledge them. One officer tried a taser. Nothing. It was like Austin couldn't feel pain. He just growled, deep, guttural, and sank his teeth into John again. Desperate, another officer kicked him square in the head. Still nothing. That's when backup came, with AK-9. The dog lunged at Austin, latching onto his arm with force. But Austin didn't react like a man. He broke free like something feral, tearing his own flesh in the process, and lunged again. Finally, after a brutal struggle, an officer managed to land a kick strong enough to stun him. Long enough to slap the cuffs on. But even then, Austin muttered something strange. Said he felt sick. That he might have drank something bad. Then his body seized, and he collapsed, unconscious and twitching. 4 people were pulled from that house by EMS. Michelle didn't make it. John was still breathing but died on the way to the hospital. Too much blood lost. Too many wounds. Jeffrey survived. But the tendons and nerves in his hand were damaged forever. He could barely grip a coffee mug after that day. And Austin, the attacker, slipped into a coma. Turned out the bottle he drank from wasn't alcohol like he thought. It was some kind of chemical from the garage. The inside of his body was burned. Doctors fought to keep him alive. 2 weeks later, Austin woke up. And claimed he remembered nothing. At first, no one believed him. He said he remembered dinner at a restaurant. An argument with his father. That he walked off into the night to clear his head. Then came the strange part. He talked about a figure. A ghostly figure that guided him through alleyways, into neighborhoods he didn't recognize. He said he followed a light, just one single flicker in the dark. A lantern near the Stevens garage. That's when he saw John prepping a barbecue. Michelle noticed him and screamed. And according to Austin, that's when the evil took over. He admitted to hitting Michelle. Said he thought she was possessed. That she was full of something dark. That he needed to get it out. When Jeffrey tried to intervene, Austin said he thought he was a demon too. So he stabbed him. And then he blacked out. That's all he said. There was no alcohol in his system. No drugs. Nothing. Not even over-the-counter meds. Just a healthy young man with no explanation for the bloodbath he left behind. Doctors eventually diagnosed it as a psychotic episode. Something so severe it disconnected Austin from reality. But the families of Michelle and John never bought it. Neither did the public. They believed he was faking it. That the whole memory loss thing was just a strategy, to get a lighter sentence, maybe even walk free on an insanity plea. The courtroom was divided. Experts argued back and forth. One psychologist said Austin's brain showed signs of genuine trauma. Another pointed to his history, drug experimentation, steroid use, trouble in school, social isolation. A cocktail of chaos. But when the tests came back clean, people began to wonder. If this wasn't drugs, if this wasn't alcohol, then what was it? No one ever figured that part out. And maybe that's the scariest part of all. Because if someone can snap like that, without warning, without reason, then who's to say it couldn't happen again? To anyone. Anywhere. At any time. Their family had a history of schizophrenia, and there was always this silent fear hanging over them, that his son might have inherited something dark, something unshakable. But what no one expected was how deep that darkness could go. Austin started showing signs that went beyond any normal explanation. There were whispers, quiet, unnerving ones, that he might be suffering from something extremely rare, clinical lycanthropy. It's a delusion, a psychological break where someone believes they're turning into a wild animal. And that might explain the way he moved, the way he acted that night. Like a beast. Like something that felt no pain, no fear, just primal rage. Doctors couldn't confirm it. No one wanted to commit to that kind of diagnosis. But anyone who saw the aftermath didn't need a degree to know something was terribly wrong. He got treatment, temporary, maybe, but eventually, they moved him to jail. And that's where he sits now, waiting. The trial hasn't started. Everything's in limbo. His lawyers are arguing that he's mentally ill, pushing for a plea that might spare him the harshest punishment. But on the other side, the families of John, Michelle, and Jeffrey? They're waiting too. But they're not hoping for leniency. They're hoping for justice. For accountability. For death, even. They've said it plainly, they want Austin to be declared competent. And they want him to pay. Now, let's talk about Madison. Madison Elizabeth Sparrow. Born September 12, 2003, in Norfolk, Virginia. A sweet, curious soul who carried the light of her family's hopes in her smile. Her mother, Heather, and her father, Richard, raised her alongside her sisters, Molly and Gwendolyn. Madison had this gentle way about her. Playful with her younger sister Molly, who adored her. She was the kind of kid who made silly faces at family gatherings just to make her cousins laugh. But behind her bright energy, there was depth. She was quiet at times, introspective, wise beyond her years. She felt deeply, loved fiercely, and always took her role as a big sister seriously. She joined the Girl Scouts when she was 9 and instantly became a leader. She wasn't just earning badges, she was building character, shaping friendships, learning what it meant to be a force for good. She helped her little sisters troop too. That's the kind of girl Madison was, always giving. Always stepping up. And like any teenager, she had her fun too. Sleepovers, movies, late-night chats with friends, giggling over manicures and inside jokes. She stayed up too late and slept in past noon, just like any 17-year-old would. Life was simple, sweet, until it wasn't. Back in elementary school, Madison met Ania, Anuka, Stalin Sky. They clicked instantly. Childhood friends who grew into teenagers navigating life together. In middle school, they met a boy, Noah Sharp. The three of them became inseparable. Walks around town, ice cream runs, quiet talks that felt like they'd last forever. Eventually, Madison and Noah's bond deepened. Puppy love turned into something real. But by early 2020, something shifted. Madison ended the relationship. No explanation. Just, gone. Noah was shattered. And in the void, Anuka stepped in. She comforted him, listened to him, texted him day and night. They grew close, too close. Before long, they were dating. But something about Noah never let go of Madison. He still talked to her. He even showed up on her 17th birthday with a gift. A quiet gesture, but one that didn't go unnoticed. Not by Madison's mom. And definitely not by Anuka. Jealousy seeped in. A slow, poisonous drip. Noah's heartbreak twisted into anger. Bitterness. Hate. And then, something snapped. They started talking, really talking. Planning. Scheming. Texts, video calls, whispered meetings behind closed doors. Not just about hurting Madison emotionally. About hurting her for real. About making her feel the pain they believed she caused. The messages were chilling. They talked about stabbing her in the heart. About using a gun. A brick. Burying her. Weighing her down in water. It was obsessive. Cold. Calculated. And the most terrifying part. They thought they could get away with it. They knew Madison loved Halloween. Loved ice cream. So they used it against her. October 2nd, 2020. Anuka reached out. Invited Madison out to celebrate early. Said they could grab some ice cream, hang out like old times. Madison, ever the optimist, said yes. She hadn't heard from her friend in a while. She wanted to buy a birthday present for Molly too. Her little sister was turning 10 in 3 days. She got dressed in her favorite outfit, black tights, denim shorts, gray boots, and a blue New Jersey sweatshirt. She added little white ghost earrings, perfect for Halloween. That was Madison. Full of life. Trusting. Excited to reconnect. At 2:44 p.m., she left. No one knew it would be the last time they'd see her alive. Madison gave her family one last hug before stepping out the door. No one knew it would be the last time they'd see her smile. The last time they'd hear her voice. The last time she'd ever walk through that front door. Later that day, something felt off. Text messages began flooding in from Madison's phone. But they weren't her. At least, they didn't sound like her. The tone was cruel. Abusive, even. Then came a message that Madison was leaving the country. Her father tried to make light of it, thinking it was just a joke, maybe a teenager being dramatic. He responded with good wishes and teased that she'd probably forgotten her passport anyway, it was locked in a safe. But something was wrong. Heather, Madison's mom, called and called, but Madison never picked up. The silence was unbearable. Heather started to panic. Madison had plans with her friend Anuka later that day, so she called her. The moment Anuka answered, she broke into tears. She told Heather that Madison had gotten upset during a conversation and stepped out of the car near a store. That was the last she saw her. Heather, frustrated and confused, told Anuka to call Noah, Madison's ex. No answer. More calls, more silence. Eventually, Heather got them both on the phone, but neither had anything useful to say. Or maybe they were just hiding it. As the hours passed, more people began reaching out. Madison's friends were receiving bizarre messages from her number too, and everyone was growing uneasy. Heather rushed home, hoping to find some clue. Something. Anything. But everything was exactly as Madison had left it. Her birthday money untouched. Clothes still folded in drawers. Credit cards on the dresser. There was no sign she'd left voluntarily. The texts didn't make sense. Madison had no reason to run, not like this. Not without even a change of clothes. By 8:30 p.m., with dread sinking deep into her chest, Heather called 911. Her daughter was missing. Heather contacted everyone she could think of. Her parents drove in from another city to help. Madison's father, living in Colorado, went public, posting on social media, begging for help. By Saturday, October 3, 2020, a yellow alert was issued. Madison Sparrow. 17 years old. Missing from Delaware. Search teams began combing through the fields and wooded areas near the University of Delaware, where Madison was last seen. The media spread her story, and the community rallied. But something darker was unraveling behind the scenes. Investigators began interviewing Madison's circle. Whispers grew louder, pointing to Noah, her ex-boyfriend. Some claimed they were together in the woods before she vanished. On October 4th and 5th, Noah was brought in for questioning. 9 hours. Story after story. Lies tangled with truth. Until finally, the dam broke. Noah confessed. The truth shattered everything. He admitted to killing Madison. And he wasn't alone, Anuka was with him. According to Noah, Anuka had grown jealous of Madison's relationship with him. Fueled by anger and obsession, they planned it. Together. Anuka lured Madison into the woods behind an elementary school. Noah was already there, hiding behind a bush, clutching an aluminum baseball bat. Madison had no idea. She thought she was meeting friends. She had no reason to be afraid. But as she stepped into the clearing, everything changed. Noah struck her, once in the head. Then again. And again. He said the second hit made him lose control. He kept swinging, even after she was already down. The brutality didn't stop. After the attack, Noah and Anuka moved her body into Anuka's car. They drove 15 minutes to a spot near I-95, close to a warehouse near the Delaware state line. There, they tried to push her body into the river. When that failed, they dug a shallow grave beneath the bridge. Using Noah's confession, police scoured the area. They found the blood-stained bat. They found Madison's burned clothes. And on Monday, October 5, 2020, they found her. Madison Sparrow was gone. The community went silent with grief. The news spread like wildfire. On Friday, October 9, hundreds gathered on the high school football field, lighting candles, laying flowers, and mourning the girl whose life had been so violently stolen. An autopsy revealed what everyone feared: Madison died from blunt force trauma to the head. DNA evidence tied both Noah and Anuka to the scene. It was undeniable. Noah was charged with first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a crime, and first-degree conspiracy. He was held on $1 million bail. Then, more than a month after Madison's murder, on November 16, 2020, Anuka was arrested too. A grand jury indicted her on the same charges. Another teen, another life swallowed by the darkness of this crime. Madison's family still searches for answers. But as her mother Heather often says, there will never be a reason good enough. No explanation can fill the hole left in their hearts. Their daughter was stolen. Not just from them, but from a future she'll never get to live. Noah should have been locked away the moment the first red flag surfaced. But like many stories soaked in manipulation, pain, and deception, the truth took its time unraveling. It started with blood, 2 lives taken. Noah confessed to detectives during questioning, yet when he faced the court, he denied everything. His defense painted him as a troubled soul, not a killer. They said he wasn't well, that his mind was fragmented. That he was under psychiatric care for schizophrenia, suffering from memory loss after a head injury just weeks before the murders in Chester County, Pennsylvania. But for the families of the victims, these weren't just legal strategies, they were roadblocks in their path to justice. Then there was Anuka. In May 2021, she pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and conspiracy. Her plea came with a deal: she would testify against Noah. She admitted they had planned this together. She told the courtroom how Noah intended to end Madison's life. And with that, a dam broke. People close to Madison came forward. They told investigators about Noah's so-called second personality, his alter ego. A darker version of himself, he claimed, one that did the things he couldn't. But prosecutors weren't buying it. They believed Noah spread these stories on purpose. That he was laying the groundwork for an insanity plea before the blood had even dried. The case dragged on for 2 long years. Then, on October 20, 2022, the trial began in Newcastle County. The courtroom was heavy, filled with 30 witnesses, most called by Deputy Attorney General Matt Frawley. One of the main events was a series of interrogation videos showing Noah shifting his story again and again, until he finally admitted it. Still, his defense tried to dismantle the confession. They claimed the police pushed him too far during the questioning, putting words in his mouth, pressuring him. But by then, the narrative was already unraveling. The prosecution had text messages between Noah and Anuka planning the murder, and the defense could only respond with weak suggestions: maybe someone else had used Noah's phone. The jury didn't buy it. Neither did the public. Even Noah's own family couldn't provide a unified story. His mother, Nikia, claimed he came home dry on the night of October 2nd. But his brother David testified otherwise, said Noah looked like he'd just crawled out of a swamp. And when Anuka followed him in, Nikia said she was calm. David remembered her slamming the door in a rage. Prosecutor Frawley then dropped something heavy. A phone call between Noah and his mother from a month before the trial. In it, they talked about school surveillance footage. Noah reassured her that his face couldn't be seen. That they were near the school about an hour before Madison was murdered. His mother's reaction? Relief. The footage eventually told a different story: a man matching Noah's build and complexion holding a baseball bat, walking into the woods with a girl. Madison. The defense clung to the idea of head injuries and amnesia, citing a fall from a bike the day before his police interview. But it was too little, too late. And everything Anuka said on the stand only tightened the noose. She claimed Noah convinced her that Madison had been gossiping behind her back. But Madison's friends and family insisted that was a lie, a fabrication used to justify something far darker. Something planned. After 8 harrowing days, with over 250 pieces of evidence, the jury returned in just 3 hours. Noah Sharp was found guilty on all charges, including first-degree murder. Life in prison. No chance of parole. When the verdict was read, Noah didn't cry. Neither did his mother. He simply turned and smiled at her. Madison's family, however, wept. Finally, there was closure. Madison's mother, Heather, spoke softly but powerfully: choose the light, not the dark. Love conquers all. She thanked her community, the school, the families, the friends, everyone who stood by them during the 2-year ordeal. They had built something beautiful in Madison's name: a memorial scholarship and an annual run, the Love Wins 5K. As for Anuka, her deal came with a price. She would also face life in prison, but with the possibility of parole after 30 years. She was a minor at the time of the crime. And so, a story soaked in betrayal, manipulation, and calculated violence finally reached its end. But for those who loved Madison, her light will never be dimmed by the darkness that tried to erase her. Tanya McKinley left her quiet hometown full of dreams. She didn't need a medical degree to break into the medical field, just some specialized courses, and soon, she was training to become a medical transcriptionist. In hopes of saving money, she moved to Pensacola and settled in with her cousin Benita. Not long after, Tanya met a guy named Tim. They hit it off quickly, their romance sparking like most young loves do, fast, exciting, a little reckless. They moved in together, and by 1983, they had a baby boy named Timothy. But real life has a way of testing fairy tales. Their relationship, rocky at best, was riddled with frequent arguments and tension. Within a year of Timothy's birth, the couple split. By the end of 1984, Tanya and her little boy moved in with Vanita again, who by then was married and raising 2 kids of her own. Tanya had every intention of getting back on her feet, finding a place of her own, and giving her son a stable life. But for now, this arrangement would do. Then came New Year's Eve. Tanya, her sister, and Vanita's husband decided to go out and welcome 1985 in style. They dropped their kids off at a nearby daycare that stayed open late, until 1 a.m., and headed to a local bar. For Tanya, who had spent the last couple of years buried in work and motherhood, it was a rare chance to breathe. She laughed, danced, and soaked in the music. The night felt good. It felt needed. When midnight struck, champagne popped, people cheered, and the world stepped into a new year. Vanita and her husband were ready to call it a night, needing to pick the kids up from daycare before it closed. But Tanya wasn't done yet. She asked Vanita if she could grab her son too, just one more hour, she pleaded. Vanita agreed. Before leaving, Vanita asked her how she'd get home, since they'd all come together. Tanya wasn't worried, she knew plenty of people at the bar and figured someone would give her a ride. That was the last time anyone who loved her saw Tanya alive. When Vanita woke up later that morning, she noticed something strange. Tanya hadn't come home. That wasn't like her. She wasn't the type to disappear without letting someone know. At first, Vanita brushed it off. Maybe Tanya had crashed at a friend's house. Maybe she just needed a break. But that uneasy feeling lingered. Then came the knock at the door. It was Vanita's mother-in-law. Her face was pale. Her voice shook. Tanya had been found. Dead. Earlier that morning, around 3 a.m., a woman in Pensacola had rushed her dog to the vet. While she was gone, her daughter spotted something odd on the side of the road. At first, the girl thought it was a mannequin. But curiosity tugged at her. She told her mother, who decided to investigate. What she found was no mannequin. It was Tanya. She was lying in a vacant lot, lifeless. Her skirt was hiked up. Her pantyhose pulled down. Her shoes were missing. A blue scarf, stained with what looked like blood, was nearby. Her wallet and identification were found several blocks away, next to her shoes. Police were called immediately. The autopsy revealed a brutal truth. Tanya had been struck in the head with a heavy object, but that's not what killed her. She had been strangled. And she had been sexually assaulted. Investigators scoured the scene. They found hairs, some pubic, some not, and even dog hair. There was a trail showing her body had been dragged to where it was found, most likely using the blue towel nearby. This told them something chilling: she hadn't been killed there. She'd been dumped. Unfortunately, in 1985, DNA forensics were still in their infancy. All they could determine was that the attacker had type B blood. It wasn't much. Their first suspect was Tim, Tanya's ex and the father of her son. Police learned from friends and family that their relationship had been rocky, to say the least. Tim had a hard time letting go after the breakup. He'd call her constantly, show up uninvited, and act like he couldn't move on. Maybe he had followed her to the bar that night. Maybe something had snapped. But when questioned, Tim denied everything. He willingly gave a hair sample. Forensics couldn't extract DNA from it, but they did compare it under a microscope. It didn't match the samples found on Tanya's body or the towel. For now, Tim was off the hook. Detectives moved on to the next logical step, finding out who was at the bar that night. Vanita told them the night seemed perfectly normal. No one stood out. No one seemed aggressive. Then they found out Tanya had been seeing someone else, a bartender named Kurt who worked at that same bar. He claimed he was at a party with friends after his shift. But when investigators talked to those friends, things didn't quite line up. They confirmed he was at the party, but not right after work. There was a gap in time. A gap big enough for something awful to happen. And just like that, the mystery surrounding Tanya's final hours deepened. They sent the evidence straight to the lab, no time to waste. There, forensic specialists worked methodically, isolating DNA from the trace saliva left behind on the cigarette butt. It didn't take long before they had their answer. When they ran that DNA against the sample preserved from the crime scene, the result was undeniable. A perfect match. It had been 35 years since Tanya's murder. 35 years of unanswered questions, of dead ends and quiet grief. But now, finally, science had caught up to the crime. And the name that surfaced from the test? Daniel. He was arrested the same day the match was confirmed. Even with the DNA evidence in hand, the investigators weren't ready to lay all their cards on the table. They wanted more than just a match, they wanted the truth. They needed Daniel to speak. So they planned the interrogation carefully. They approached him slowly, withholding key pieces of evidence, choosing their words to peel back layers of denial. They started broad, shifting the topic to Tanya, then narrowing in, asking where he was the night she died. Daniel claimed he didn't even know her. Calm at first. But under the bright lights of the interview room, and the weight of the questions, that calm started to crack. Then came the bombshell. The detectives told him they had found his DNA at the crime scene. Daniel didn't confess, not right away. He kept denying. But his voice began to shake, his eyes darted. He was cornered. When the detectives leaned on the DNA, reminding him that it was irrefutable, he faltered. That's when the story began to spill out. At first, it was all about explaining the DNA. Daniel said they'd had sex that night, trying to plant doubt, trying to blur the lines. But the investigators weren't buying it. They kept pushing. Eventually, Daniel broke. He admitted he had met Tanya at a bar on New Year's Eve. Said he offered her a ride home, and instead brought her back to his place. They drank. Things escalated. Then they argued, over what, he couldn't remember. But in a sudden outburst, Daniel grabbed a wooden cutting board and struck Tanya on the head. When he realized she was dead, panic set in. He loaded her body into his car, dumped it elsewhere, and tossed her belongings along the way before going home. But even this confession was full of holes. Detectives picked apart his story. What about the black dog hairs found on Tanya's clothing and the towel used to wrap her body? Daniel said his roommate had a Labrador. It was a weak explanation. Then there was the cause of death. Daniel insisted it was the blow to the head. But medical examiners determined it wasn't the blunt force trauma that killed her, it was strangulation. That changed everything. The inconsistencies painted a darker picture. Maybe Tanya did fight back. Maybe Daniel tried to silence her with a blow to the head, but when that didn't work, he strangled her. Either way, it was clear he was trying to downplay his role, to rewrite the crime in a way that didn't make him look like a monster. But the truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface. There was more than enough to charge him. The DNA. The confession. The contradictions. Daniel was arrested for Tanya's murder and taken into custody. Detectives reached out to Tanya's family. Her son, Timothy, had waited decades for this moment. When he got the call, his voice cracked with emotion. He thanked the officers for not giving up, for chasing justice long after most would have walked away. But Daniel would never stand trial. Just 2 weeks after his arrest, he was found dead in his cell. Suicide. The autopsy confirmed it. For Tanya's family, it was bittersweet. The man who had stolen a mother, a daughter, a life, he'd escaped true accountability. But still, justice had finally come. After 35 long years, her story had an ending. It was a chilly evening when Kevin finally pulled into his driveway after a 40-minute drive home. He'd picked up some fast food on the way, nothing out of the ordinary. The kind of meal you grab when you're not in the mood to cook, maybe needing a moment alone after a tense argument. But as he pulled up to the house, a cold knot twisted in his stomach. The front door was wide open. Alarmed, Kevin jumped out of the car, heart pounding. He rushed inside, calling for his wife, Diana. The moment he stepped into the living room, he froze. Diana was lying there, barely conscious, blood covering her face and head. The sight was too much to process, but his instincts kicked in. He dialed 911 and tried to keep it together until help arrived. When the police questioned Kevin, his story didn't sit right. There were gaps, odd details, moments of hesitation. But then they checked the fast food bag, still warm, and the receipt confirmed the time and place of purchase. Everything lined up. It was enough to hold off suspicions, at least for the moment. Kevin was allowed to leave, but not without providing a blood sample. At that time, DNA analysis wasn't available, but investigators could still compare blood types. Anything to find out whether Kevin's story truly held up. At the hospital, doctors worked frantically to stabilize Diana. Her head injury was severe, but it wasn't caused by a gunshot. Instead, it looked like she'd been struck with a small but heavy object. Worse yet, she was pregnant. Saving 2 lives became the hospital's top priority. As the hours passed, the doctors managed to stabilize Diana, barely, but the situation was far from over. Surgery was still needed, and the question of whether the baby would survive hung in the air like a storm cloud. Meanwhile, investigators began piecing together what had happened. Medical experts confirmed that Diana had been sexually assaulted. Evidence was found on her body, but Kevin claimed the two had been intimate earlier that day. The timing was impossible to pin down with precision, which complicated the case even further. As Diana clung to life, her family and Kevin remained at the hospital. The next morning brought devastating news: the baby hadn't made it. The team had done everything they could, but it wasn't enough. Diana, still in a coma, showed signs of improvement, but the doctors warned her brain might never fully recover. Despite Kevin's seemingly solid alibi, police remained uneasy. There were too many unanswered questions. He and Diana had argued earlier that day. He'd left the front door unlocked. He claimed to have seen someone suspicious outside the house, a vague detail that raised more questions than it answered. No one had seen anything. And there was no solid proof to clear or convict him. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered an unsettling pattern. A string of attacks had plagued Tustin and surrounding neighborhoods over the past year. In December 1978, a 17-year-old girl was beaten with a piece of wood and sexually assaulted. She didn't survive. 4 months later, another woman, 21 this time, was murdered in nearly identical fashion. Then in July 1979, a woman was attacked in her apartment and fell into a coma. She survived, but when she finally woke, she couldn't remember anything about the attack. Then came September 1979, just before Diana's assault, when a 34-year-old woman was found murdered, her injuries bearing an eerie resemblance to those of the previous victims. All of these crimes followed a grim pattern: women attacked in their homes, sexually assaulted, bludgeoned. Police began to believe they weren't just dealing with a series of isolated incidents, they were tracking a serial predator. Possibly a killer. To calm public panic, police issued a warning through the media. Women living alone or in low-rise apartments were advised to take extra precautions. Patrols were increased. Doors were double-checked. Still, fear lingered in the air like smoke. Tips began to pour in. Witnesses mentioned a white man with thick black hair spotted near several crime scenes. Police investigated a handful of potential suspects, but none led to solid breakthroughs. The case grew colder with each passing day. Then, 1 week after the attack, Diana opened her eyes. It should have been a moment of relief, but doctors had more bad news. She couldn't speak, and she didn't remember anything. Her brain was still healing, and no one could say for sure if her memory would ever return. Just as the city tried to breathe again, another brutal assault shook Tustin. A 24-year-old woman was found dead in her apartment, bludgeoned and sexually assaulted. The killer had struck again. Back in the hospital, Diana's recovery was slow. Physical therapy became part of her daily routine. Her speech didn't return. Neither did her memory. Days turned into weeks. Then, 6 weeks after the attack, during a therapy session, something unexpected happened. The therapist gently asked her if she remembered who had hurt her. Without a word, Diana pointed to her wedding ring. Later that day, when her mother came to visit, she asked the question that had been haunting her for weeks. Was it Kevin? Diana nodded. Her mother wasted no time. She took Diana straight to the police. After a series of gentle questions, Diana confirmed what no one wanted to believe: Kevin had attacked her. Everything changed. The alibi, the fast food receipt, the suspicious story, it all took on a darker tone. Suddenly, Kevin wasn't just the grieving husband, he was the primary suspect. And the chilling part? Investigators still weren't sure whether Kevin had acted alone, or if he was somehow connected to the string of violent assaults that had haunted the region for nearly a year. The hunt for answers was just beginning. The authorities were left reeling, their minds racing as they examined the strange details surrounding Kevin's connection to a series of brutal attacks. Diana, a woman left scarred by these unspeakable crimes, had begun to remember the horrors she had endured. Her testimony seemed to cast suspicion on Kevin, raising the chilling possibility that he could be the one responsible for the violence. But the police weren't ready to make that assumption just yet. They asked Diana and her mother to play along, pretending as if Diana hadn't regained her memory. The plan was simple: return home with Kevin, but all the while, the police would be watching his every move, hoping to find that crucial piece of evidence that would link him to the murders. The authorities worked in the shadows, carefully monitoring Kevin, tracking his every step, hoping that he would slip up. Meanwhile, a breakthrough came in the form of physical evidence at the crime scene. A shocking discovery was made beneath Diana's fingernails: bloody skin particles that pointed to the attacker's identity. Further forensic analysis revealed a blood-type match between the attacker and Kevin. The puzzle pieces began to fit together, and the chilling conclusion was undeniable: Kevin was the one who had attacked Diana. The police theorized that a twisted motive lay behind the assault. Diana had rejected Kevin's advances, which they believed might have been the catalyst for the violent attack. But Kevin vehemently denied this, claiming they had been intimate earlier that night. To get to the truth, the police turned to Diana. In a conversation, she recalled the brutal attack in vivid detail, her memory finally clear, and she confirmed that it was Kevin who had assaulted her. As the investigation unfolded, Diana's mother, in an emotional moment, admitted that the family could no longer live under the same roof as Kevin. With this, the police made their move and arrested him at a local store, rather than at home. Even in handcuffs, Kevin maintained his innocence, his voice unwavering. But the evidence against him was too strong to ignore. The preparations for the trial dragged on for months, 10 long months in total. During this time, Diana's health improved, and her ability to speak returned. Kevin's defense team tried to use an alibi involving a fast food restaurant, but it was weak at best and fell apart under scrutiny. Diana's testimony proved to be the crucial element that sealed Kevin's fate. In November of 1980, Kevin was convicted of assaulting Diana and murdering their unborn child. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. But there were lingering questions. Before his arrest, 2 similar attacks had occurred in the same district, though both victims had survived. The similarity between these crimes and the ones Kevin was now convicted of raised suspicions that he might be connected to other, unsolved assaults. But after Kevin's arrest, the attacks ceased, and the case seemed closed. However, the story didn't end there. Years passed, and in 1996, the investigation into the serial murders was reopened. Semen samples taken from the earlier victims were retested, and the results were nothing short of shocking. The DNA didn't match Kevin's, but instead, it matched a man named Gerald Parker. Parker, who had been arrested the same year as Kevin, had his DNA tested, and the match was undeniable. The puzzle pieces began to shift once more, and the truth that had eluded investigators for years started to come to light. As the investigation unfolded, it was discovered that Parker and Kevin had once worked together on a military base. Parker also owned a dark-colored van, strikingly similar to the one described by witnesses near the crime scenes. During his initial police interview, Kevin had mentioned seeing an African-American man near a dark-colored truck on the night of Diana's attack. This revelation led the police to reconsider Parker's involvement in the crime, casting doubt on Kevin's guilt. While Kevin was still in prison, the local prosecutor updated him on the progress of the serial murder investigation. They asked him for a DNA sample, which he willingly provided. As the analysis continued, the police visited Parker in prison to discuss the case. They had not yet charged him with the attacks, but they hoped to learn more. Initially, Parker denied any involvement, but as the detectives zeroed in on Diana's attack, his story began to unravel. Parker admitted that on the night of Diana's attack, he had driven his truck to Kevin's house with the intention of prowling the neighborhood, searching for a potential victim. But when he heard screams coming from inside the apartment, his plan shifted. Parker revealed that after hearing Kevin leave the house, he noticed the door to the apartment was unlocked. He waited a few minutes, then entered, finding Diana alone inside. He confessed to attacking her, adding that he had no prior connection to her. The confession didn't stop there. Parker admitted to 6 murders and 3 non-fatal attacks, and DNA evidence confirmed his involvement in the crimes. The chilling truth was out, and with it, Kevin's innocence was established. In a swift legal turn, the prosecutor moved to overturn Kevin's conviction. After 16 years in prison, Kevin was released. The public outrage was deafening, not only because an innocent man had spent half his life behind bars, but also because it had taken so long to identify the real killer. When Kevin walked free, the state of California paid him $10,000 in compensation, a sum that many deemed far too small for the years he had lost. But the state didn't stop there, eventually awarding him $100 for each day he had spent in prison, bringing the total to $620,000. Despite Kevin's exoneration, Diana initially refused to believe he was innocent. She had once sworn that Kevin was the one who had attacked her. However, when DNA evidence from her body matched Parker's, Diana's story began to shift. She now claimed that Kevin had attacked her before leaving the apartment, only for Parker to enter and assault her as well. Yet Parker's account was different. He insisted that when he entered the house, Diana was lying on the bed, unharmed and without any signs of distress. He admitted to striking her on the head, but insisted that he had not known Kevin. Diana's family, still reeling from the trauma, suggested an alternative theory, that Kevin and Parker had conspired together to commit the crime, explaining why Kevin had left the apartment and left the door open. But both Kevin and Parker denied any such conspiracy, with Kevin insisting that he would never harm Diana or their unborn child. The case of the bedroom basher had torn lives apart, leaving a tangled web of confusion and betrayal. And even though Kevin had been freed, the scars of the past would remain, each revelation adding another layer to a tragedy that had taken too long to unfold.